there's a process that you use um, when you're draining the wort or the barley tea out of your mash tun. And that process, you begin to drain the liquid wort out of the mash tun very slowly. The goal being that you want the grain to slowly settle and create its own mesh network that holds back big chunks of grain from coming through and helps actually give you a fairly clear batch of barley tea wort at the end of the mashing and at the end of the sparging or the rinsing of the sugar. But how do you do that? One of the things that you do is you can take a pitcher and you slowly fill the pitcher with the liquid and then you pour it back on top. Problem with that is if you just pour it on top, it disturbs the grain bed and you're just back where you started because the grain hasn't had a chance to settle. So it helps to have, some people have created sparge arms, which are these high-speed things that dribble water slowly down on top of the grain. Then you'll see some pretty elaborate stuff on the internet. But I'm first-time brewer, simple is easy for me. So what I have for today is I have a tin pan, I have corn skewers, a cutting board, and some star sand. Okay, so that's what I'm doing. I'm going to spray this down with some star sand, spray down my cutting board. All right, grab my corn skewers, and you can see just how sharp those bad boys are. Okay, and commence to poking holes in this. You don't want to see me do this. This is how effective it is, right? Going to create a lot of little holes for the initial pulling of the liquid wort out of the mash tun. That's called foreloft, all right? And it's a technical term, and you have to keep looking up all these technical terms. To me, it's settling the grain bed so that it acts as a filter. That's what you're doing. So you do that when you pull the initial liquid off the mash tun or your first runnings, and then you do that again. We're going to do a batch sparge, so we're going to pour all the hot water in there, and then you mix the grain bed up again so you can really rinse it well. And then we'll do a second foreloft, or do a second settling of the grain bed so that we can get all the sparge water through. And then we'll have a fairly clear liquid wort to start our boil with. Sound good? All right, let's do this. And bam, there you go. So this will be my sparge arm, for lack of a better term. This will be the way I dribble liquid back into the grain bed without disturbing the grain bed. So there's a $64 million question out there that we all have. How well did my mash tun keep everything warm since I've been gone for a lot longer than an hour? All right, well, we're going to check that out. I've got my thermometer sanitized. I'm going to open the lid and we're going to stick the thermometer in there and we're going to see just where we're at. Well, I'll tell you, I'm pretty excited about this because our temperatures are about 152 on the edge of the cooler and about 155 in the middle of the cooler. And this is after an extra hour of mashing. So that's pretty exciting stuff. That means we should have extracted all the sugars and we should be good to go. This is a setup if we were ready to fill the boil kettle. You'd want the hose to lay it just a little bit flatter, but hopefully it flattens out when when the wort starts to go through, because you don't really want to aerate anything at this point. Oxygen and beer at this stage is not the best, okay? But what we first have to do is do that four-loft stage, or settle the grain bed so that it acts like a really good filter. So that's what we're doing next. So we're going to get rid of the brew kettle, and we're going to get rid of the chair, and we're going to do our four-loft. And you want to run this very slowly, okay? You're not trying to do anything. You're not trying to gain traction. You're not trying to build a whole new widget. All you want to do is settle the grain bed, gently settle the grain bed, okay? And take the time to create its own natural filter. And that's what we're looking for. And this is coming out, this is a beautiful dark amber color, so this is going to be kind of fun to watch. Our defense against channeling the grain bed and messing the grain bed up. A little four-loft boat. All right, round two. So this is my grain bed settling stage 2, right? So look at that. You can see what it looks like, see how clear it is. Still some stuff floating around in there, not a lot. It's certainly better than round 1. Hopefully at the end of this stage we'll do one more, and then we'll be ready to fill the brew kettle. So here we are with four-loft number 3, and you can see just how clear this stuff is as it's coming in. So that's pretty exciting to see. I think we will stop with 3 four-lofts, 3 rinses, 3 settlings of the grain bed, and then we'll go with pulling off what's known as our first runnings, which is basically emptying the grain bed of all of its barley tea, of all of its wort, and then we do the sparge, okay, or the real heavy-duty rinsing and stopping of the sugar production. We are filling the 3-gallon boil kettle that I have with runnings out of the mash tun. So this is what's called the first runnings, and you can see that the grain bed is starting to show up a little bit, all right, and right over in there. And so we will fill this up with whatever we can pull off, and then we pour in our sparge water, we rinse that. But in the meantime, once I get these first runnings off, this first liquid out of the mash tun, when I get this first runnings off, I'm going to put that on the stove and start heating it up. You've seen my setup. I've got to use 2 burners and a lot of low volume to heat up quickly. And so my goal is to heat this stuff up as fast as I can. I will combine as they begin to reach temperatures. I know that's going to add some oxygen. Boiling will take some of that off. I think I'll be all right. Okay, but we'll see. This is my first batch, so have at it. You can begin to see the top of the grain bed showing up, all right, as we're pulling the first runnings out of the mash tun. This is our mash tun. This was a cooler from Home Depot, and I tried to follow all the different directions online, and none of them seemed to work. It took a lot of extra trips, and Home Depot, we live out in the boonies, Home Depot was over 20 miles away. So took a couple of trips to Home Depot and a couple of online orders to get the right size gaskets, and on and on and on. So there's an advantage to making these things yourself, and there's an advantage to buying the pre-done ones. I'm kind of thinking that if you want to get started quicker, go with the pre-done ones. If you're really into squeezing that last dollar, then make one yourself, right? But as you can see, the top of the grain bed's now exposed. Okay, we're going to continue to pull off these runnings until it's done. And then we have our hot water waiting to do our batch sparge. And we'll take these first runnings that are over here and we'll put them on the stove to get started. That's really close to 3 gallons for this pot. So I'm just under 3 gallons of first runnings pulled off of the pot. I've turned my spigot off, put the lid on for now, turn the spigot off, didn't tighten the lid down so I could get free flow of liquid out, and so we're going to stop there, and then I'm going to batch sparge. So be back real quick for batch sparging. All right, batch sparging, here we go. We're going to take the lid off, we're going to pour in our hot water, we're going to mix it up and let the grain bed set for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to foreloft, and then after we're done forelofting, we will drain the grain bed for what's known as the second runnings. All right, let's get ready to rumble. Well, folks, since I'm about 5 minutes into this 170 degree sparge rest before I start to pull the second runnings off, I'm taking time out to start collecting my notes on what I've done today. This is a little bit of the notes I'm trying to gather so that I can learn what I'm doing better and be better prepared for the next time. All right, so as I go along, I'll just continue to collect notes, and hopefully I'll have a journal that will give me clear indicators of good, bad, right, wrong, and then I can continue to get better and better at this homebrew thing. I mean, this is going to be the best 5-gallon batch I've ever brewed, right? Because it's the initial, not the first batch, the initial batch. All right, remember we talked about the hops, right? And my hops additions are a 1/2 ounce of Centennial, 1 ounce of Cascade, 1 ounce of Cascade, 2 ounces of Citra at flame out, and then 1 ounce of Citra and 1 ounce of Cascade later on. Well, what do I have? I've got several bags of hops. In fact, I put my dry hops additions over here in this extra bucket. So here's my dry hop additions, the 1 ounce of Citra and the 1 ounce of Cascade. Okay, right there. So that's for dry hopping. So then during the boil, I'm supposed to have a 1/2 ounce of Centennial. So here's a Centennial. 1 ounce of Cascade, that's 1 ounce. 1 ounce of Cascade, there's another ounce. And 2 ounces of Citra, 1, 2. The problem is all of these things of Centennial, all of these hops packets are 1 ounces, but I need 1/2 ounce. So what do? Well, went to Walmart, and for about $15, I got myself a digital scale. Now, the digital scale is one that you just turn it on, you put the batteries in it, of course, turn it on, and that's pounds and ounces and tenths of an ounce, okay? Put your vessel, see that high-speed, low-drag plastic vessel on there? It weighs 7/10 of an ounce. You press the 0 button again. Boom, shakalaka, we're back down to 0. And now I weigh out my ½ ounce of Centennial for the boil. So from the second runnings, this is our third foreloft. And there's some stuff that's kind of collected in the middle down below. It's definitely clearer than the first time through. I'm not sure if this is as good as it's going to get or not. I might be willing to try a fourth shot. I am offloading a little quicker than I had been in the past, so maybe I'll slow things down a little bit and see what I can figure. So this is my balancing act. This is the first runnings, and they are heating up. And I don't want them to boil yet. There's the gauge on the stove, sitting at a high. I don't want these to boil yet. But they're getting really close to boiling. So I may have to just turn the heat off for a while. Let them chill while I collect the second runnings. So you can see we're still collecting second runnings, and we're about at the 3-gallon point. So I'm going to stop and dump this into the boil kettle and turn the boil kettle back on and get it heating and collect the last of these second runnings. Yeast. This is what we're looking at. So the recommended is, we chose the dry yeast, optimum temperature 59 to 75. I just pulled it out of the refrigerator. I'm going to let it warm up while the wort is getting the boiling temperature, and then about 30 minutes or so before the end of the, well, more like about 10 minutes toward the end of the boil, I will hydrate this yeast and get it ready to pitch, because the boil has to finish. There's a hop at burnout that has to occur. That's 10 minutes there. And then there's the cooling of the wort, and then getting the wort into the fermenter at the right temperature and making sure that it will allow the yeast to survive. So that's the yeast plan. So I've combined everything into my large brew kettle. I heated half of a couple gallons of the wort in a smaller kettle while heating the rest in the large brew kettle. And now we wait to see. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to do, I don't know how much wort this is. So in retrospect, as a learning point, I've taken my paddle and I've made a mark so that I can tell roughly how much wort that is. And then I'll learn about that, and I'll be able to put marks on here that are food safe. And I'll be able to tell how much wort I have and what I got out of my mash process. So I'll bring you back in once the hot break has occurred. Okay, so using the LED light on my iPhone, you can see that we're starting to boil some, and there's this whole layer of scum that's being built up on the pot. That's your hot break. And so we need to let this boil for quite a bit more. Let those proteins come up to the surface, group up together, clump up together, and then sink to the bottom. And when the surface clears off, oops, that's when we'll begin to time our 60-minute boil. Well, you can see there hasn't been much change. And I'm thinking that we are pumping in as many BTUs into this wort as my stove can handle. So we're just going to start the 60-minute boil now. It's the best it can do. Now, some keys to starting this is every time you add hops, you increase the chance of a boil over as the hops go in. So you always have to be prepared for that. One of the best ways that I've seen so far on the internet, especially since I can't pull this thing off of a burner very quickly, is to have some cold water in a spritz bottle. So I'm going to have some cold water ready to go to help tone down any sort of boil over that might occur by adding the hops. Alright, so I think you remember this. This is our half ounce of hops. It is a half ounce of Centennial. This is going in at the 60-minute point for this boil. Okay, so we're done. Turn the heat off. I'm actually going to move the pot. Now there's a 10-minute hop rest. And then we will go ahead and begin to cool the wort. Alright, what's going on here is I sanitized some water, added a little bit of yeast nutrient to it, and now I'm going to put our yeast in there to hydrate it. Okay, now how do you hydrate yeast? You take 10 times the amount of water. So if it's 11 grams, you have to add 110 grams of water to a solution, or you heat it up to roughly 105 degrees. Throw your yeast in there and let it sit for a little bit and let it hydrate, and then stir it up until it becomes a cream. Hopefully around that time you're ready to pitch your yeast and it all works out so that you can put it into your kettle. So let's get some yeast. Okay, the sterilization kings that are out there, we have sterilized the outside of my yeast packet, sterilized the shears, and of course the water has been sterile. It's actually been boiled and then come back down. So now it's time to add the yeast. Now you can see that I clumped it, so I should have poured it in a much slower rate to let it hydrate a little bit better. But there you go, and we'll deal with it as it goes. All right, 15 minutes yeast rest. So the hop rest is done. Time to move our hot wort into our ice bath. And add more water to the ice bath. Sanitize this and gone through and started stirring. And it accomplishes a couple of things. It exposes more and more and more of the wort to the ice on the outside. The other thing it will do is the whirlpool effect is supposed to also take the sediment, once the sediment gets going, and collect that in the middle. In the meantime, we'll take a temperature reading, if I can find a thermometer. Must be in the star sand. Nope. I have to find a thermometer and sterilize it, and then I'll check the temperature and see where we're at. Time to check the specific gravity. So, what does that mean? Well, what it means is that we're going to check the density of the fluid. Now, the original, the recipe for this beer said the specific gravity should be about 1.5. And we're really close. I would say we're 1.5 or 1.48. And pretty happy with that. So yeah, good job. So fresh out of the Star San, our temperature is now lowered, and this is the one time where you want to introduce oxygen to your beer. So we start our, whoops, that's not good. Start our pump. Get the siphon going. You want to just let that dribble as best you can. Okay, the next step in all of this process is oxygenating the wort. Now I don't have pure O2. I just have a fish tank pump. Well, the aeration is working overtime and created a pretty big head. We've got a little over 5 gallons. We're going to pour our yeast in. Loosen it up a little bit. I added a little bit of wort to this yeast just to give the yeast some food for the moment so that they could keep going. And now we pour those bad boys in there. Going to oxygenate a little bit more. Put the lids on and call it a night. This is the Northern Brewer Big Mouth Bubbler, and this is their universal lid. And I chose that because I had read reports where the other lid leaked a little bit. And so there you have it. I think we're set up for the night, and I'll put this stuff in our patented fermentation chamber, and we'll see how it goes from there. Okay, there she is, safely wrapped up, hidden from all visible light, airlock on, and hopefully in the morning we can see some bubbling away without explosive fermentation. We'll see what happens. All right.